When it comes to film adaptations from novels, there are many creations that tried to properly represent the original story more accurately, to be more loyal to the source material. Some of them succeeded, some failed quite badly. From the beginning of cinema history, the people were anxious to see stories from theater plays and novels on their silver screen. But that is a story for another time. Or not. Well, in this video, I'm gonna talk about a story, a very important story in the modern times literature, that is regarded as one of the best of all time, a story that had a powerful impact on many readers, and that when it is presented on the small screen, or on the silver screen, it clearly gains interest, no matter what. Shogun is a 2024 10-episode series that presents the story of an English merchant who arrives in Japan and who is thrown into a very intense political conflict that will determine and will define the future of Japan in many aspects. The series was adapted from the 1975 novel written by James Clavell, and is the second adaptation of the novel, the first one being made in 1980. The novel is inspired by real-life events and the characters have a different name, so the story is technically a historical novel but is fictionalizing certain events, depending on Clavell's decision on how to present his characters and the historical event he took inspiration from. The 2024 series was produced among others by Hiroyuki Sanada and stars Sanada in the role of Yoshi Toranaga, the man who will eventually become Shogun, or at least what the series is telling us. Being caught lately in this mix of Japanese cinema and video games with samurai themes and great battles in feudal Japan, I was kinda motivated to watch this series. I mean, not just because of that, but I saw it as a continuation of this wave that I started to ride. Sure, I knew about Shogun, and from the first sight of the cast, I knew the series would be interesting, but I never realized it would be quite a delight to see a TV series made in such a beautiful way, with a different feeling and yet a familiar one at the same time. There are so many things that define Shogun as an incredible series. The show has a lot of elements that deserves to be studied and reflected upon. From the evolution of the characters to the way the actors perform, to the way the time and the world is historically presented to be believable, the way it is filmed, there are things out there on the screen that are memorable for the casual viewer. There is no denying that. But when you want to learn something, to study it, and to see what the show is really made of, you can expect a powerful example of modern cinema. When I started the show and watched the first 10 or 15 minutes of the first episode, my gut told me this is something else. This is an old-style show somehow, but put on a modern, contemporary screen. And I truly loved it. Probably I had this feeling because the production was not made in the style I was used with, in a Western way, and that is a good thing in my opinion. It made me interested in the story. It made me want to see what is gonna happen, how the story is gonna unfold, how the political plots will end. It is true, the way a film director presents its film is a pivotal element in the way the film reaches the audience. And I have to say, the way this series is presented, it sure reaches the audience in a very, very unique way. The events presented into the show are the ones that are from the novel, no doubt about that. But being an adaptation, it is truly an interesting way to see how the events are unfolding in front of your eyes, due to the narrative changes and the way the stories unfold. The main engine of the show is the political conflict, the battle for supremacy. You see, as a viewer, how the conflict evolves with every step and how Toranaga is affected and is reacting to the obstacles he is facing. And from this moment, the show is starting to define the characters. You see how Toranaga is planning his steps, you see how his loyal men are reacting and are giving his life to his cause, a thing that might be seen a bit off from time to time. But then you see the other side of the conflict. You see how Ishido and the other opponents are trying to stop Toranaga in his steps, creating this great game of chess between Ishido and Toranaga. And then you see John's side of the whole story. You see how he is sent from one hand to another, and then how he gets close to Toranaga and Mariko. The story is balanced in a way to make the viewer be intrigued by the whole context, to see each party's reaction and understand their struggles and the evolution of the conflict. There is even a side in which the Catholic Church has a role in this conflict, thus presenting other ideas, other important pieces of the bigger puzzle in this whole story. But the political struggle is still not the main weapon of the show. The character's development is the important part of the story, and more importantly, Toranaga's reactions and decisions. There are moments when you may think that Toranaga is a villain or just a great strategist, depending on the way he reacts and plans every step of his plan. But after all, the way Toranaga is presented, It truly makes him a great mind in the art of war, using both his allies and his enemies in a way to obtain the victory. The series does not present the whole story of the novel, but for what it presents, even if the outcome is not shown, the viewer can clearly feel the ending is in Toranaga's favor. It is not necessary to see the ending of the novel. Taking it as a standalone story, the viewer totally gets it. Toranaga will win the conflict and will become Shogun, while John might remake the ship and probably might have a chance to leave Japan, even though in the novel he never can leave those lands. So from a certain point of view, I quite love how the story is presented as a unique way to retell the story. The conflict that might look just political has deeper meanings in the culture and the society of Japan. It also has a religious part that makes everything to be more interesting and unpredictable at the same time. And all of those elements that might appear out of nowhere, like love or jealousy, traditions and family, make the conflict be more important. Even this difference between the Japanese and John's cultures makes the conflict interesting by adding more layers of understanding, not only the historical time of the story, but the people that are part of the mix and their views, their culture. So, being caught into the story, the viewer will see all those things, will start to know the characters and will see the conflict evolve in an unexpected and intriguing way. I do not know, but to me this is the perfect recipe for a well-written story, even if it is a novel or a TV series. Let's face it, a political conflict is an interesting plot for a historical story, especially one that is based in a time that could be interesting from many points of view, such as Japan at the end of the 16th century. But as a great game is presented to the viewers, the players of the game have to be quite intriguing in order for the game to be truly recognized as a very good one. I want to talk a bit about the characters of the show because somehow I feel those representations are unique in their own way and bring something new to the original story that makes the context more impactful to the viewer. There is a discussion as to who is the main protagonist of the series, by being Toranaga or John, one being the titular character while the other is just a witness to the main story and is a representation of the viewer in this foreign world. The way the show is structured, I tend to feel that in a way, there are two protagonists that are guiding the series forward, because the show introduces John first as the man who the viewer should pay attention, and then the whole attention is passed to Toranaga, who crosses the fine line of a protagonist and a supporting character. The characters' personalities help a lot with this idea, because through the eyes of John, the viewer discovers this new land, these new people and their customs, but also is trying to understand and adapt to see the outcome of the context, making John being the protagonist witness to everything. Toranaga, on the other hand, there is this character that crosses many lines of a character definition in a way that creates more questions. Sometimes he is acting like a villain, other times it looks like he does not want this conflict. He is forced to do what he has to do in order to keep his word and to protect his honor and family. Sometimes there are moments that may look unpredictable, but they are quite planned. The way the whole story is modeled by all those elements makes Toranaga have the role of a protagonist, because he has to face many challenges and has to find a way to solve them, but he is a side character because his presentation and evolution is already made. You see him struggling and facing different obstacles, but you don't know how he feels most of the time, what he is thinking. So yes, he is a protagonist, but he is also a side character. You can probably say that John and Toranaga are the protagonists of their own story, but the stories are almost one and the same. There are other characters that are evolving their own story and are part of both stories, like Mariko, who is serving Toranaga but also starts to have a romantic interest in John. You have Ishido, who is the man who ignited the conflict and who has this huge hubris, this huge desire to deal with Toranaga once and for all. You have Yabushige, who kinda plays on both sides on the conflict in order to achieve his purpose. You have Father Alvito, who has his own plans to complete. The other character stories present, just like Toranaga and John, this dual part of the story, because Mariko is not just a woman who serves Toranaga. She is a Christian, and her religion and knowledge makes her a central character on so many levels, making her in a way a main character also. Yabushige has this plan in which he is on both sides because he wants more power, but he knows that one way or another from somewhere will get his desired reward somehow. Father Alvito is just a messenger between some bigger players of the game, but still, you don't know if his acts are truthful or he hides something else behind the way he tries to be a good priest for everyone. There are so many layers in this story that makes you think, Yes, the characters are amazing, are extremely important, but the characters would be like that if the conflict wouldn't be that big? There is a thin line here, because you might say that no, the characters won't be like that if another conflict would be present, but after all, the conflict would not be quite as important as it is if the characters would not have their personalities and their beliefs presented like that. From a cinematic point of view, Shogun is a TV series that totally feels different. For a 10-episode series, there is quite a lot of time to present the story in a very unique way. When I started the first episode, I was caught in this shot that may look like it was taken from a Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Nothing bad here, the shot prepared me for what will come next. It gave me this sensation of mystery and adventure, that something good is going to happen. But then when the story was shifted and started to focus more on Toranaga, somehow the cinematic style changes and it reminds me more of the classic Japanese cinema. From time to time, it might look like the style is combined in a sort of way, but even this is happening, the way the entire series is filmed, it truly gives a certain different feeling of pure and clean cinema. The concept of the series helps a lot because the series takes time to present all the details of the show. Every episode is made in a way to make the viewer forget it is watching a series. The way the episodes are structured, the fact that every episode has a certain rhythm to make the viewer forget about the time, and the sensation created after the watching of an episode, that sensation of a great film, made with so many small details and interesting plot moments, makes Shogun to be one of those series that you might not be able to forget that easily. Depending on the viewer, some may return to see this series once more, some may not, and I understand that. The show has a certain vibe that might be for some viewers as a show that is just a one-off, but nevertheless, it's the way the series is structured, the concept behind the script, and the way it is filmed. Those are the elements that will make Shogun a memorable series. The series has dynamic moments, the battle choreography is incredibly well made to present the whole battle in a more clean way without quick cuts to trick the eye of the viewer, thus giving this sensation the viewer is there with the characters and it sees the battle firsthand. There are scenes where the fights are using the quick cuts method to show more details from the battle when it is necessary, but even those are made quite clean somehow, to give a good sensation of conflict and stress, but this is not made that often. The fact that the soundtrack is not there to make the viewer wake up for a moment to get its attention, and the special effects that are made in a way to truly believe what is there on the screen, and to feel horrified or amazed, depending on the context, add more details to the reason of why Shogun can be considered a great series. Even this idea to present a difference in languages is a good concept and helps the show to feel like there might be two styles into one series. For using the Japanese and English languages to create a rift between the characters and their culture and to present this duality of those two worlds is a thing that, yes, it is taken from the novel and from the original series, but it is made so well that makes the viewer feel like John, a man in an unknown land. I am quite happy that the show was made by a Japanese production team, because it truly feels like a fresh and exotic story. I am not talking about the costumes or the way the actors perform or the details to the cultural and historical elements, because today someone might make a proper research and present a story as it should be. I am talking about the fact that the show feels foreign, in a good way. It is in its concept. After all, John might be the main protagonist, so everything to him is strange, it is foreign, and as I said, with time, he gets used to the new experience and adapts to the culture and to what it surrounds him. And this thing can be felt while the viewer watches the show. It might feel different, it might be unique, uncommon, however you want to say it, but you get used to it, and it catches you there in the chair, and you get the story, you understand it, a thing that is quite important for any movie or a TV series. There are a few films that give this sensation, but the way Shogun has done it, it truly feels direct. It truly feels personal, like the producers are putting the viewer in John's role and the story unfolds in front of its eyes, almost as John sees it. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned the 2024 series being the second adaptation of the novel, the first one being made in 1980. Now, there are differences between the two adaptations, which is quite normal, due to the style and the time those two series were made. But the way both of them are representing the story, it feels original depending on which one the viewer is watching. Compared with the 1980 version, which is more light-toned and is presented in a more friendly-like and theatrical presentation, The 2024 series is darker, is more serious, and presents more details and elements that could make the story more impactful. From what I have read, the Japanese critics were not that fond of the 1980 version but praised the new series a lot. From my perspective, I think both series deserve to be seen as a standalone series. They do not need to be compared. Of course, the comparison will be made and some viewers may prefer one series over the other, probably the new series being the favorite one, but after all, let's face it, there are 44 years between the two versions of Shogun. However, there is a personal comparison that I will make. I have been a fan of Hiroyuki Sanada's work for a long time, since I saw him for the first time in Rush Hour 3 15 years ago, and I consider him an amazing actor. Most of the time, due to his performances and popularity, I always compare him in my mind with Toshiro Mifune and his work. The comparison, as I said, was a personal one, and I was quite surprised to realize that both Mifune and Sanada portrayed the same character. It was a beautiful coincidence to me as a fan of their work to see they had the chance to connect their legacies like that. For the first time since the 1978 Japanese film known as Shogun's Samurai, a film in which both Sanada and Mifune played, and in a way gave a more important value to both versions of Shogun. As for the way the 1980 version is different from the 2024 version, I really have to see the original version again and decide for myself which one is better. In the 1980 version, Toshiro Mifune and Richard Chamberlain are giving life to the story, with some voiceover moments made by Orson Welles, which instantly makes the series a classic. But the 2024 version has Hiroyuki Sanada, Tadanobu Asano, Nestor Carbonell and other great actors, new and old, that make the version memorable. So after all, I will say that both versions are good in their own rights, so now it's up to the viewer which version might want to watch, the original one or the recent one. It will not matter in the end because the story is a good one after all. It just depends on the viewer's choice. There are many series out there that can be watched and experienced by someone who might want to relax. Shogun is one of those series, however when you start the series you can be sure you are gonna watch an incredible story. The way it is made, it truly feels different, clean and unique. It is interesting to me to see this type of TV series made with such passion during these modern times. Don't get me wrong, if there is no passion in a project, the viewer will feel that in an instant. But when it comes to Shogun, not only the viewer feels the passion and the dedication of the producers and the actors, but it truly feels the story. It is getting attached to it, intrigued by it, and has a desire to see what's gonna happen next. Shogun has that certain ingredient that makes the series to be remembered. Whether it is the story, or the context, or the actors, or the rhythm of the series, Shogun will have an impact on its viewer. Just like the novel, Shogun proved a good TV series, if it is done properly, can have a huge success. It does not need quick cuts during battles to catch the viewer's eye. It does not need to force some characters to do something that might feel unnatural or force a character more into the story than it is necessary. With a recipe that follows the original story and with an attention to details that give credibility to what the viewer sees, Shogun is truly a series that will remain in the viewer's mind. Bringing a different vibe to the table, Shogun can be considered a small piece of cinema in its pure form and probably an example for other TV series that might be adaptations from other novels and want to be successful. A few days ago I read that the producers decided to create 2 more seasons for the series, so if this is the first season and is made and presented like that, I am curious to see what the next seasons will be like, where they will go with the story. They will focus on the final battle and we will see Toranaga become Shogun, they will create an original story that might be a tie-in with the novel, or they will take the true historical events and will represent them accurately with this show. I can't wait to see this. Whatever it may be, it definitely will be something amazing. I just wish to release those seasons sooner. I can't wait to see them.